Hello guys, today we're going to do some landscapes. Now these are going to be just quick, easy landscapes for relaxation, playing with your watercolors, just having fun, not thinking too hard. We're not using any references. You don't need any kind of painting skills. This can literally be the first time you're picking up your watercolors and paintbrush. These were done with a watercolor pencil, but I'm going to do two versions. I'm going to do a landscape with watercolor pencil, and then I'm going to do one with a regular pencil. So if you don't have watercolor pencils, no worries. So these landscapes work in a bigger format as well. If you want to make them bigger, you can, and it's going to look just as good. If you want to have them be quick, 2-minute sort of things where you just kind of not think too hard and relax, then I would suggest making them smaller. And the way to do that, if you have a larger sketchbook page, is to just draw these little boxes. I drew them with just a regular fluorescent pencil, but you can draw the box with any pencil. Don't do a watercolor pencil for the boxes because you don't want the box dissolving and blending into your paint. We're going to do 4 different ones. We're going to do one with scraggly trees in the background. We're going to do a mountain one. We're going to do a bushy tree one, and we're going to do a flower field one. For this one, you only need your watercolors, no pencils needed whatsoever. So let me show you how it works on other types of paper. This is watercolor paper that's not cotton. Even though it's cold press watercolor paper, it's pretty smooth. This is also a watercolor paper sketchbook cold press. This one also I ended up on the smoother sides of the paper. That's okay, it doesn't really matter which side you end up on. Now I will say the watercolor pencils work better on the cold press paper than the regular pencils because the watercolor pencils will dissolve a little bit and they won't be as scraggly as regular pencils on this cold press watercolor paper. But if you're using hot press watercolor paper or mixed media paper that's smoother, then it's really not an issue. I have a smaller sketchbook, but I went ahead and still made it even smaller. Like I said, the smaller you make it, the easier and the quicker it is. So, however, you can make them bigger. Here's ones where I made them bigger and they work just as well, and I think they look really nice. And I like to make this kind of wonky little box because then it sort of frees you up from being too precise and too careful. Kind of gives it an edge, like it's a little framed painting. And I think it looks nice in a sketchbook. And again, it just allows you to be looser with your approach and not so precise. So this is the scraggly tree one. This is the bushy tree one, mountain, and flower field. And you can always put a sun in the background, and you can put little birds in the background if you want. But you don't have to put a sun in, and you don't have to put little birds in. It doesn't matter. None of these have suns or birds, and that's fine too. It just depends on what you like. Here's some that I made on an art creation sketchbook. So this is not watercolor paper. This is just regular sort of sketchbook paper, but it is pretty durable. Considering it's not watercolor paper at all, it holds up pretty well to watercolors. So this is the scraggly trees ones, the mountain one. I just wanted to try them on all different types of paper so you guys could see. It doesn't really matter what kind of sketchbook or paper you have, you can still do this exercise along with me. Here's the flower fields one. If you make it a little bit sharper and less blendy in the foreground and then more blendy in the background, then it kind of just looks like the field stretches off into the horizon. Here's the bushy ones. This is an 8.5 by 11 sketchbook and it's mixed media paper, but it is 100% cotton. This is a Strathmore sketchbook. So if you have a larger sketchbook like this, that's okay. You can still do the paintings along with us. Here it is. It's kind of hard to fit it all in. Then you can just kind of draw the boxes, and if you want, you can even make all different types of shapes of boxes. Or you can make the boxes very uniform, which is what we're going to do together right now. Here I made 8 boxes because we have 4 different landscapes, and I'm doing 2 versions of each. Watercolor pencils and regular pencils. So for the watercolor pencils, I'm going to draw with the watercolor pencils while the paper is still wet. If you have watercolor pencils, that's what I recommend. It just makes it a lot quicker because you don't have to wait for the painting to dry. If you don't have watercolor pencils, you will do the painting background and then you will wait for it to dry and then come back in with regular pencils. So it just adds a little bit of an extra step, but it's not a big deal because it's not like you have to sit there and wait for it to dry. You could use a hair dryer or a heating tool, or you can just walk away, do something else, come back, it's dry, and it's good to go. Today I'm going to use this little watercolor palette. You don't need a lot of colors to do watercoloring. This was a sampler set of gram watercolors that I purchased. It just came with these 12 colors. 12 colors is plenty as well. Even though it's gram paint and it's very juicy already, I'm still gonna pre-wet it so it's ready for us. And these are the pencils that I'm gonna use. We're gonna use the leaf green for the bushy trees. We're gonna use the deep indigo and violet for the mountains, and we're gonna use the ink black for the scraggly trees. But you can vary up whatever colors you use and do something different. I'm using a number 6. Oh, I guess I used it enough that it wore away, but this is a number 6. I believe it's squirrel hair, but it's an off-brand brush. It's getting a little scraggly, as you can tell, but that's okay. It still works perfectly fine. I've discovered that I do like using these softer types brushes for watercolors. Let's start with the bushy trees. Gram colors are so intense. I mean, you really gotta love them. And I'm taking it right into the bottom. Wait, what did I say we were gonna do? The scraggly trees first, right? Now to make the bottom be green, we're gonna just add some yellow, and that kind of makes it green. It's too much. If we added too much paint, we can take some away. Let's add a little bit of a pink to the sky, and then that's going to make it purple. Give the sky like a bit of a purplish tinge. And then if this green feels a little too unnatural, we can make it a little bit more olive green by adding some red to it as well. And by using only 3 colors, it sort of unifies the painting. And I'm going to use a little paper towel to dab out little clouds. You don't have to do that at all, but if you want to, just take a little paper towel and just dab right on the paper. And then we're doing the scraggly tree, so I'm using the black. Here it is. Here's the black I was looking for. I'm going to sort of make a tree shape. And to do that, you just scribble. Just scribble kind of randomly at first, because you just want to cover that space, and then just start making like little scraggles come out as though it's a tree, as though it's a tree line. That's pretty much it for that one, but maybe slightly. Now I'm using a different blue, and then we're still going to use that same pink. I just love that one. And see how you can like watch the colors sort of blend together, and it's just so lovely and nice. And there is no right or wrong way, because we're not using a reference. You're just basically putting on stuff that you think looks good. So there's really no right or wrong way. Let's make it a little bit more olive green. That's the one we're doing with the regular pencil. So I was going to add some watercolor pencil on there, but I'm not going to do that because it's not supposed to be. Then let's do the bushy tree one. So let's just create a background for the bushy trees first. Gram paint is really flowy, so it just kind of flows and does its own thing when you put it down. Let's do a stormy sort of sky. A stormy sky is nice to create if you have ultramarine. This is ultramarine. And I'm just going to take it all the way down again. It just makes it easier for these little ones to make them more cohesive if you're using sort of the same colors all throughout. But you can certainly, if you have nice greens, you can certainly use nice greens. But because this is a more limited palette, I'm doing a bit more mixing. And I'm mixing it right on here. And then if I add brown to the ultramarine sky, it just makes it, it just neutralizes the ultramarine into like a grayish color, which for our intents and purposes makes it sort of a stormy kind of scene. And then for the bushy trees, we were going to do the green. Let's do the mountains now. And as you can see, if I'm using watercolor pencils, it goes really quick. And this is, I think, ultramarine violet, maybe. And I'm adding a little bit of that alizarin crimson. If you go outside the lines, you can clean it up if you want, but you also don't have to. One of the ideas with this is that you do go outside the lines, so it's not an issue. And I'm using, I think, a phthalo green. And if I look at that and I'm like, oh, that green is so green, we can just use some of that same alizarin crimson that I just used to neutralize it if we want, if we feel like it's too much. And let's do a nice sort of bright sky. Let's take it all the way down, because the grass needs yellow too, so it just unifies the whole painting. Once the emgrain paint is wet, it just loads up your brush, just like immediately. You dip it in there like a little dip and it's already loaded up. Let's use blue to make the grass. If it's looking too blue, we can add a little bit more yellow in to make it green. This is what I meant, that you can just mix right on the page as well. Let's go ahead and add a little yellow sun. This is Inktense Tangerine. You could have added a yellow sun instead if you wanted to. I'm gonna do violet and deep indigo for the mountains. And you just want to kind of make them scraggly. And then maybe look a little bit like they're going behind each other. Right now I'm just using deep indigo, but you could add some violet for like highlights, or the warmer areas are kind of going to be violet. Then sometimes it's nice to have a couple colors. Let's take an ink black and make little birds. All of these we're going to come back to once it's dry and use regular pencils on top. And our final one, we're doing the flower field. Flower field is, even though you're not using watercolor pencils, so it seems like it should be easier because it's one less step, this is actually the hardest one. Coming in with some blue for the sky. Coming in with some, let's take a little bit of burnt sienna. And it's okay if you vary it up, because then it just kind of looks like clouds. And then you just go all the way down but not all the way down. Leave like about this much of it dry, and then keep this area wet. It will be easier to blend out if that paper is still wet. So over here, we're just gonna start adding flowers. Let's add some like little red flowers, and we make them a little bit bigger in the front. And for flowers, you're just adding dots or circles, and then you make them a little bit smaller in the back. And see, they kind of start feathering out when they hit the wet paper. And it doesn't matter what colors you use for the flowers. You just use whatever colors you like. It's okay if they blend into each other. Let's lighten it up a bit by adding some nice warm yellow. Make it a little bit more cheerful. It's getting a little dark and sad. If you want a dark and sad sort of feel, you can. And sometimes that's very sort of therapeutic depending on what your mood is, to sort of paint your mood. That's basically art therapy right there, just paint your mood. And then I do like to add some green back. So I'm taking some olive green to indicate the grass and stuff that's in between the flowers. So I like to fill the empty spaces with green at that point. Again, not being too precise. I'm not like outlining each flower by any means. You just kind of drop the color in there and it will all blend in and do what it needs to do on its own. Because this is the trickiest one to do, it's actually good that we have two of these. I'm using the Derwent Inktense just because that's what I have. You don't have to. Any watercolor pencil will work. Making the paper wet up to a certain point. We don't want the very bottom of it wet, because then that will make it harder to make the bottom ones more sharp and defined. Let's make it a bit of a pink sky. Oh, I do have a yellow actually. So we could add a yellow sun, let's see, over here. It's picking up some of the red, so it's not exactly yellow, but that's okay because that makes it stand out more. And the only reason I put it there is because that one's there and I didn't want it matching. So there's really no rhyme or reason to that. Let's start with the nice, with nice big, that one's really flowy. So see, that's why it's good we left the bottom of the page not wet, so that it just kind of stays put. Otherwise, it would just all blend out and flow out, and then that's not necessarily the look we're going for, even though it does look pretty. But this one's going to be a lot more flowy in the background, and that's okay. I actually like that look just as much. So this is just a reminder that you can't really mess these up. If they come out more flowy, that's fine. If they come out less flowy, that's fine too. It just looks fine either way. So if you guys have any questions about these, or you feel like you need to know something else before you feel like you can give it a go, just drop me a message or ask me in the comments, and I'll definitely give you some additional input. I'm just trying to pick colors that are different from the ones we used here. I don't want it to be the same thing. As the paper starts to dry up a little bit, it gets a little bit less flowy. So the colors underneath are going to be more blended in than the colors on top, if that makes sense. So depending which colors you put in first will create a different effect depending on the order you use them. And if you feel like some of the colors you want to be brighter and they're getting washed out, just go back in with more paint and put them in. Watercolors always dry lighter than they appear when they're wet. Even though it might appear kind of dark, once it dries, it's gonna really lighten up. And again, I like adding yellow just for some happiness. And here I'm adding the same yellow that I used in the sky for that cohesive impact. This is why I said you don't need a huge palette with a million colors. They're nice to have, don't get me wrong. I love my huge palettes with many, many colors, but you also don't need that to start watercoloring. You can buy a small set of 12, a small set of even 6. That Daniel Smith introductory set of 6 is great. That's going to be enough for you to get started. And then you can slowly build on the palette and add colors you like as you get to know more and more what you enjoy. Let's add a little bit of green. And I want to use a different green, but at the same time, I don't want it to be too green. So I'm going to mix in a little bit of that red into the green so that it's neutralized. So I used that phthalo green, and then I added in a little bit of the alizarin crimson that I just used, and I neutralized it right here. Okay, so here's more of that green, and then add a little bit of alizarin crimson, and then you get a nice green. And then we're gonna go in and add it. By adding alizarin crimson, it really does make the colors, like it gives it that oomph. It's a very strong color. We could already start coloring on these because they're already just about pretty much dry, but I don't want to start, get my hand into this one. So I'm going to give it a couple minutes and I will be right back. It's mostly dry. I'm just going to go ahead and go for it. I picked out some colors in regular pencils that are as similar to the watercolor pencils as I could. These are Luminance. The only reason I'm using the Luminance right now is because these are the ones that I had upstairs in my room where I do the videos. It doesn't really matter what pencil brand you have. So I have black, dark sap green, moss green, violet brown, Prussian blue. For the first one, we're just using black for the scraggly trees. Very easy to create a sort of diluted kind of effect with the pencils. Then it looks less scraggly, so you have to be kind of careful if you want to keep it scraggly and press a little bit harder. And it doesn't matter if you do just trees on one side or trees on two sides or trees all the way through. It doesn't really matter. Let's say we want to add a little sun. A happy little sun. There we go. For the bushy trees, I set aside dark sap green and the moss green. And these are going to work really well for the bushy trees because we want that blended effect anyway. So, and here the green blending into the sky actually works for us as opposed to against us because we can just go along with it and use that. I really hope you guys give this a go because it's super easy, but then it creates just really fun scrapbook pages. I'm going to add some of this dark sap green just to give it a little bit more variety. If you have the smaller sketchbooks, you can make it like the whole page, or if you have these much bigger pages, just go ahead and draw either symmetrical squares and rectangles or the ones that are different sizes. And then we're going to do the mountains. I'm using violet brown and Prussian blue. Let's add a little bit of this Prussian blue to fill them in. And you see how I left some of the spaces kind of open? That's okay too, because then it just makes it look like a highlight. when the background shows through. Or you can pretty much not leave any open. It just depends what you want to do. Just another reminder that there's really no right or wrong way to do it, and you can't quote unquote mess up. Whatever you do, it's going to come out looking like a cute little scene without too much effort. And obviously if you use references, then you could probably make it look more realistic. But then I feel like that just like more pressure, because now you're trying to make it look like something, and then you might get disappointed if it doesn't come out exactly perfect or whatever. Whereas here, there's like no pressure, and you can't possibly be disappointed because it's not supposed to look like any certain thing. You have no expectations for how it's going to come out to look. We don't know what it's going to look like until we finish it. We have no idea. We're just going in randomly and intuitively. Oh, I have one of my Prismacolors here. I actually have my black Prismacolor here too. We can just do the little birds without any sun even. Okay, that's it. I don't know how long these took. You guys can check on the video how long they take, but I would say 1 minute to 2 minutes tops for each little painting. If you only have like 15 minutes to do art, you can sit down and make an entire page in 15 minutes. If you only have 5 minutes, you can sit down. Watercolors are super easy. You just pull them out. You can like plop in a background. Let's say you only have 1 minute. Plop in a background, walk away, do what you need to do, come back for 1 more minute and fill it in. With 2 1-minute sessions, you can have a little painting. And if it's a small sketchbook page, you can have an entire page done literally in 2 minutes. So here's the scraggly trees. And as you can see, it works well, like if it's a more square shape or if it's more rectangular, it doesn't matter. It works well either way. Here's our bushy trees, mountains, flower fields. And again, this one we used watercolor pencils, and this one we used regular pencils, and I'm not sure there's really like a whole lot of difference in how they end up looking. The only difference really is just, do you feel like waiting for paper to dry or do you not feel like it? Here's the page. Here's how it looks. I still can't fit the whole thing in. Maybe like this. There you go. That's the filled in page. And if you want different shapes, you can do different shapes, just as a reminder. It doesn't have to be the symmetrical layout. It can be this kind of layout. You don't even have to plan the boxes out. You just start putting them in. And then when you have smaller spaces, you put smaller boxes in. Try to fill all the spaces. Even if it's a box this tiny to fill in space, go ahead and fill it in, because these are landscapes. So a very flat thing would work too, or even a very tall thin one would work. It doesn't matter. Like, it all works. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think. Hopefully my instructions were very clear and made sense, and I hope everyone gives it a try and uses it to relax, play with your watercolors, have a really good time with it, and also a relaxing time with it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more tutorials, go ahead and subscribe so you get notifications. I do have more tutorials coming in the near future. Thanks for watching. Bye.